So Tristan, we for this week are bringing on Andy Meade. Now Andy Meade, for the listeners, is the owner of Meade New Homes. He's got a background of, well, actually started in property in 87, he tells us, 1987. So he's got a background with a lot of property experience and many decades working specifically with developers for national house builders and also marketing properties for national house builders.
If you buy a brand new home in Scotland, you'll get rented for 41% more than the same equivalent second-hand property. And it comes down, I think comes down to about sort of 21% in the southeast.
We've spoke a lot about the different type of green ratings, EPC changes, and we thought getting a new home specialist on for this podcast is going to hopefully give some really valuable information for people on where to put their money next and a different option to where to spend some money. So I'm looking forward to getting him in. I really like Andy. I've known him for quite a few years. He's very knowledgeable and I know he's going to share some good information. Specifically, what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I think it'll be good to catch up with him, see what trends are going on. Obviously, there's massive demand at the moment, especially for lettings. New builds just go literally the day they go on the market and they get a premium price, especially with the change of EPCs coming into effect, probably in 2025. It'll be interesting to see whether we are seeing more investors buy them. I know I'm certainly seeing that, but whether it's seeing it sort of nationally, and just really get some more insight from him. But yeah, really looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I really think the listeners and property investors, whether you've invested already in property, you're looking to invest, you're a current landlord with a portfolio, the landscape is changing over the next few years. And this is a podcast which I think you'll get a really good inside free bit of information in exactly what you need to do with your money over the coming years. So definitely listen into this one and we're going to get him in now. So Andy, thanks for joining us on the podcast. Looking forward to getting stuck into new homes and how we can relate that back to property investors. But how are you doing?
Yeah, good. Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the chat.
Good stuff. So the first thing I wanted to do is get straight into advice for our listeners. And one of the things that I always think about, you see a lot of these new big developments being built at the moment, 500 units, 1,000 units. And it seems to be, they're creating maybe a school in some occasions and they've also got convenience stores and things like that. But if I was a property investor and I wanted to purchase across one of the, say, 3 phases, when would be the best time, do you think? Because we've been in the industry for a while. It used to be buy off plan, you get the best deal. Yeah. But I don't think it's quite as simple as that anymore.
No, I think what you need to look at, if you're, let's go through. So say if it's a large development where the developer has got 2, 3, 4 show homes of different house types, the chances are they will want to sell those on a buy-to-rent basis, or buy-to-let basis.
The show homes?
The show homes.
Okay.
So you'd buy the show home, but you'd lease it back. So it's a buy-to-lease, they call it. So you buy the show home, and then you'd lease it back on a guaranteed rental with the developer. So in some instances, they'll guarantee a rental return of 6.5%. The good thing about that is you've got a guaranteed tenant for the duration of the development or however long they need that show home for. That's the best way to get onto it as an investor, is to try and get the show homes. I'd always look at the developer's year end. So if they've got any stock units that they haven't sold prior to their year end that they want to get in for their figures, they may do deals on that.
A bit like when you're buying a car, a brand new car, same thing.
Yeah, then the registration dates.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of developers that will do massive deals on it, especially the way the market is at the moment. Yeah. But if you can get in at the right time and you can understand and you know when their financial year ends or their half financial year ends, what they want to do with their stock units, if they've got stock units they want to sell, that's usually where you will get the biggest deal. Or if you're prepared to exchange contracts on an off-plan deal.
So I've given some advice on this podcast about stock units, but just to explain that to someone listening that maybe doesn't know what us in the industry would call a stock unit, what exactly is a stock unit?
So a stock unit is a house that's built, finished, doors closed, all the building work's finished, and it's just sat there. So it's a unit that has been finished off and hasn't sold, or it may have sold and something may have happened with the chain, so it's come re-available. So it's literally bricks and mortar that are sat there as a finished unit as pounds, shillings and pence for the developer.
Yeah, which buyer can move in.
Yeah, it can move in straight away. So it's all signed off. It's all got its NHBC sign-off guarantee, CML signed off. So it is effectively a stock unit. So when we say stock, you go to stock, you buy it off the shelf.
Yeah,
it's effectively you can buy it off the shelf.
And that's a much better deal for our investors than something that's not quite built because the developer's got time on their hands before that money needs to be in the bank for their targets.
And I suppose going back to the show home scenario, the benefit of that is it's less wear and tear, and it could be for a 2 or 3 year basis at a good rental that you've agreed prior. So your figures are based on a buy to let to buy that new home with minimal wear and tear. So come the time at the end of that development, you've still got pretty much a brand new house, haven't you?
Pretty much so, yeah. Now, the developers I've worked with in the past invariably will go back in and redecorate. Some will change the carpet, some won't, because effectively, you've got the wear. There is wear and tear that you're getting paid for. Mm-hmm. Usually, the best way of doing it as an investor, if you can get because you're buying it at, let's say, 2022 prices, you're renting it out for 3 years. So that market over 3 years, you're going to get the capital growth as well as a guaranteed rental income. Mm-hmm. So it's invariably the best way to do it if you can get onto their early doors and get the show units.
And at what stage would that normally be available, or could someone potentially get that wrapped up at? Would it be at a later stage or at the start, or typically?
It would be at the start. So what they'd want to do is, so if they're doing, say it's a 1,000 unit development, they're going to have 4 or 5 show homes. Those completions on those 4 or 5 units will invariably fund potentially a lot of the first phase. Mm. So if there are 5 units that are £1 million, £1.5 million, £2 million, that's money they've got into their bank before they finish building everything else. So they've already started to recoup the costs of the road structures, the drainage, the whole infrastructure.
Marketing for the site, I would have thought as well.
Yeah, so that they want to look at ways of getting their money back, and rather than having a property sat there that's not earning them any money, so effectively it's a stock unit they've built, not earning them any money, they can use that and they've got the money back in from it. So it's the best way to do it as an investor if you can get the show homes on a leaseback basis.
And I guess the bigger the development, the longer the show home is probably going to be used. Therefore, the longer you've got that guaranteed rental income as well.
Yeah.
No, it's a really, really good set of tips there. So stock units and show homes. And I would imagine if we're looking at a site that's got, or a development that's going to have 3 or 4 phases, buying the first phase, which is what I would call for buyers the uncomfortable phase, because you've got the building, the contractors, none of the kind of evergreen part of the development is through at that point. That's the kind of more uncomfortable and inconvenient part of it, is probably going to be the cheapest time to buy a stock unit as well, I would have thought, compared to the 4th phase.
Yeah, I mean, if you do the marketing properly, and if the agent's marketing the property, the stock unit shouldn't be there, because the stock unit should all be sold. Mm. But invariably, you are going to get, especially if it's a large unit, a large development where you've got, I don't know, you might have 50 of the same house types on the same phase. And if those house types sell very, very well, they're not going to have stock units. If they're units that don't sell very well, then they're going to have stock units.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And we said on the intro that you've got a fair few decades worth of industry experience in new homes, working for developers, agents, yourself, etc. With your London experience that you had previously, how have you found the home counties and London differs for developments and developers themselves?
Perception. From working in main developers in London who had offices in outside of London, it was always, it's the London lot and the London market's easier. Invariably, the London market was easier, but it was a lot busier. Mm. So whereas if you were selling a house, if you had a development in, say, Bracknell, you'd have a competition of 5 or 6 other developers within a 3-mile radius. Mm-hmm. If you're selling a development in London, invariably you've got 10 developers in a 2-mile radius. Mm. So it's finding the buyer and how you make your development stand out, and how you get the buyers come to your development. So it's a completely different animal in terms of the market. And the market where we had it very, very good 7-8 years ago, that obviously struggled over the last 2 or 3 years. But from speaking to people I know who are still there, it's still the same, as that the marketing has to be tip-top. The marketing has to be always one cut above what it used to be by the competitors.
Would it be that correct or wrong perception that more investors and buy-to-let purchasers would typically go for the London sites over the home counties? Do you think that's fair? Or?
Yeah, there's a lot of overseas investors just purely for the perception of London. Mm. Especially zones 1 and 2 were very, very popular in terms of Chinese buyers, overseas buyers. Zones 3 were you would get them. Anything outside Zone 3, it wouldn't really be an investor market. So 1, 2 and 3 were very, very popular, are still very, very popular, I understand, purely for the fact that as much as the London market suffered over the last three or 4 years, it will always go up. It will always be a strong investment. There will always be renters there. There will always be people that want to rent within the London market. So from a commodity, it's very, very good. So whether the market goes up or down, if you're looking at it long term, you're going to do very, very well.
Yeah, no, excellent stuff. And we've spoke, Tristan, a lot about how landlords and the way they have to rent properties is changing and will change over the coming years with more energy efficiency, EPC ratings, and being a bit more green friendly. Are you finding that developers are kind of acting in that way already, or is that not something that's on the agenda at the moment? With
they're having to because of the planning laws. A lot of the planning laws are changing, so there's a lot more green open spaces on the developments. Whereas before they try and cram as much as they can in. Yeah. Whereas now, if it's a 6-acre development, 2 of those acres have got to be for open space or for ponds or for walks or for wildlife and what have you. So there's the open spaces, plus there's the sustainability in the houses as well. So there's I think we spoke about this earlier about the energy efficient boilers that are now starting to come in. A lot of them haven't started doing them yet, but I'm pretty sure over the next year, 2 years, they're going to have to start using the heat pump boilers. There's a lot of reusable rainwater that is being used. So the whole eco-friendliness, if that's the right word to say, eco-friendliness.
Green friendly, yeah.
Green friendly of houses has evolved massively over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I think there's developments around here. I've definitely noticed more open space or more parks or little mini football pitches and things like that. It definitely feels like where the houses are, they might still be relatively congested, but then there is opposite them some really nice open space, whereas before it used to be just jam-packed, wasn't it, a little bit? So that's definitely one change. What other changes would you say have happened, specifically since COVID and things like that? Have we seen that come out in the wash now, and how developers are changing because of COVID?
Yeah, a lot of the layouts of the houses are changing. More understanding of working from home. A lot of people changing from sat on the end of their worktops now to having a designated area, whether it be a 10x7 hub workspace area, whether it be a designated room where that room then may have been open plan. Yeah. So there's the developers have, I wouldn't say all of them, there's a lot of them have taken into account there is a lot more need for working from home. There's a lot more technology going into houses with fibre connections, with ports throughout the house.
You get a lot of like media walls and things like that.
Yeah, so rather than just having the standard media wall, you might have one in the lounge for obviously TV and everything else, but you may have one in the study area.
Yeah.
So do you think typically we're going to start seeing, at the moment we see a lot of open plan living space with living areas, we're going to start seeing a bit more enclosed and private just to allow an extra office space, or is it going to be maybe an additional room or space?
It'd be an additional room. I think you will still see the open space because that's what people want and that's what people aspire to. Yeah. I was talking to a developer this morning and went looking around his units, and he was saying that they've got this massive kitchen, lounge, dining area, and he didn't like it. I said, but this is what people want. This is what the buyers are looking for now. So it's the aspiration of not being able to close a room off. I mean, I've got it in my house. We've got a dining room in our house, and this gets closed and never gets used unless somebody special comes. Yeah. We don't have anybody special comes, so it never gets used. But whereas if that was all open plan, it would make a massive, kitchen, dining, breakfast room. That would be really nice. So yeah, a lot of people want the larger rooms, and a lot of people aspire to having the larger rooms rather than. When we first bought our first homes, we've got to have 3 bedrooms, we've got to have 2 reception rooms, we've got to have this, 1 reception room if it's across the whole of the house, and then you've got the kitchen tucked away. That is what people want nowadays.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know whether that will change or become back to the normal. I've done a lot of viewings on just normal resi properties, and even families have said to me they still want the open plan kitchen, living, dining space. But they're not overly fussed on a living room being a huge living room like they used to be, because they're now thinking actually the living room, it could easily be split into 2 because otherwise I'm going to be working from the sofa. And I don't know whether that's just a short-term thing, whether that's going to change.
I think it's long-term. I sold a house 2 weeks ago to a guy that would never buy a brand new house. And he said he's been looking for a second-hand home. He wanted 4 bedrooms. He wanted it open plan, and he couldn't find anywhere. And he found one house that was ideal where he could have knocked the rooms through and done this and done that. He spoke to a builder to come and quote for him to do the work, and the builder said he can do it, but he wouldn't be able to do anything until 2024.
Wow.
So that's nearly just over 2 years of where he's looking to get, or where he can book it into. I need my house redecorated, and we've got a big staircase, and I said to Dominic, I'm not going to do the staircase. We know a decorator, and he came round, and we booked him in now for November.
Wow. Trades are so busy.
But because people can't now do that with the second-hand homes, they're going on to the new homes where it's already done.
Mm.
So the decoration's already done, the open plan living is already done.
Mm-hmm.
So they're making a concession that where they wouldn't have perceived a new home as what they wanted to buy is actually, it ticks all the boxes because of all the changes that have happened.
The other appeal, I think, for landlords and property investors, and something that's a huge problem in the property market at the moment, is timescales, because people finding at the top of the chain is such a dilemma at the moment where there's not enough stock on. And I think investors that are so keen to capitalise on a growing market now, once they make the decision they want to pull the trigger and buy a property, they don't want to offer on something and then sit and wait for someone to potentially never find for the next 6 months. They want to go on it now.
Yeah.
And that's where new homes, not just for property investors and landlords, but for people that, like you say, maybe never would have bought a new home previously or had that stigma, they're now going to the appeal that you can effectively move into a brand new property on more or less a guaranteed timescale as well. And that seems to be the way that the market is drawing to the top of the chains. And also for I think, for property investors and developers, that they're now looking at new homes as a real appeal with all the green functions and all the energy efficient mortgages and things like that in play. The new homes market is really got a good buzz about it at the moment. I guess the question is, why can't we build enough new homes, and why haven't we been able to build enough new homes over the last 10, 15 years to handle the supply or handle the demand?
How long have we got?
Not that long. In a short
right,
answer.
So short answer is, so if I go from today backwards, being completely honest, whereas beforehand, if you were buying a new home and you were given a date of, August, September time, the developer will always give a quarter rather than a month, because obviously it's a man-made product, and sometimes there are issues. Where we are in today's market, with the procurement of materials being an issue, labour shortages being an issue, a lot of new homes are being delayed in terms of when they're being delivered. And that's just being completely honest. And it's not, we're not talking years, but we're talking, wherever it be in September, it might be October, November. What I'm doing now with some of the developers that I'm dealing with now is that we've got a site that we're launching in the next 2 or 3 weeks where he's already got the roof trusses on, but he's saying to me, I don't want you telling anybody any dates before December. Now, we're now April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So that's 8 months.
Yeah.
It doesn't take 8 months from roof trusses being on to then finishing the house. You'd be looking, invariably, I would have thought about 4 months. But he's buying himself the timing, which is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So we're going to be saying to the buyers that buy these units, right, we're looking at December. It may well be August, September, maybe September, October, November, but just bank yourself on December.
And the developer, it's not like they can build more because they need those ones completed to then invest in the next project.
Yeah.
So by everything being slower, it means there's less coming to the market.
Yeah,
which is obviously causing the blockage.
And you've got the planning issues as well. There's, depending on what planning authority you're dealing with, some are very, very developer keen to work with. Others are very, very not building that. We're not building this. If you're going to build that, you can't have the garages because we don't want people to be parking on the developments. Well, okay, just because it hasn't got a garage doesn't mean people are going to get rid of their cars. So there's quite a few issues still with planning.
So they still find that even with the massive shortage that we're seeing around, they're still being very strict in certain scenarios like that.
Yeah.
So they're not trying to work with everyone.
Not all of them. No, not all of them. No. There's some that are. There's some that are very pro development. There are some which are very negative towards development, and I've got to be careful what I say, but they will make a change for the sake of making a change. And it's for them to say, Councillor Brown made that change when it didn't actually need to be done, but him making that change put things back 3 or 4 months. So there's issues with the planning, there's issues with procurement, there's issues with staff shortages, trade shortages. But if you're with the right developer who doesn't cut corners, which are the ones that we deal with don't, and you're honest with the buyer from day one, say this is the date we're working to, this is where we are. We've got the plan permission, we've started building, we're at first lift, you invariably will take 6 months from first lift.
Yeah.
So you're going to be looking at that time.
Yeah.
So it's all about being honest and being upfront with the buyer in terms of what their timescales are going to be. Because the builder wants to build it as quickly as he can.
Yeah, of course he does.
If it's a builder any worth his salt, he is going to build it as quickly as he can, but without compromising his own standards. New homes are still very, very good. If you've got the right agent that you're buying through and is upfront and honest with you with discussions with the builder, and then so if there's a change in the date, there's a change in the date. Nobody can change that. Nobody's making it longer to annoy somebody. But if the dates move from August to September, and I don't tell you till, and I'm told in May, but I don't tell you till June, it's like, hold on, well, I'm getting ready to move in next month.
It is where I think people have to be careful with the estate agency industry, because I'm not saying you have to buy through X, Y, or Z, but if you are buying potentially through a corporate agency, for example, which has a high staff turnover and it's got a lot of different departments, and you're an investor that's looking to put your money and your eggs into that basket, the communication that you might get from that contact at that agency might hinder your plans a little bit, not always, but potentially. And you compare that to talking directly to a developer or bespoke marketing agency like yourself, then you're going to get the communication channel much, much better than if you are at a corporate. So I think it is also important to raise that just be careful the agency you're purchasing for as well. I know on your LinkedIn, because I follow you on LinkedIn, you're king of the stats. So if anyone wants some inside stats in new homes and land, or sometimes just random, then check out Andy Meade on LinkedIn, definitely, or Meade New Homes. But one of them that you raised was actually to do with golf courses and the amount of houses in the UK. Because I think that really sets the expectation, because I think a lot of people feel the UK is overbuilt and overdeveloped and there's too many properties, and people are kind of like, we need to slow this down, but actually it's not the case at all, and there is a huge shortage of properties. And that statistic that you mentioned showed that there's way more space for us to move into.
Yeah, I think the government have set out a guideline that they want to be building 300,000 new homes a year every year. We're currently, I think last year was just below 200,000. The year before was 187,000. Also, we had COVID and what have you in between. But they're a long way short of being able to meet their target of what they want to do.
Yeah.
So if they're building 300,000 new homes every year, obviously there's going to be a social element in there. There's going to be the affordable living in those. But what people need to understand is that with them buying these new homes, say for example, let's say they're a 4-bedroom detached home, which are £500,000. Somebody's going to buy that. Now, if that's somebody who's selling a 3-bedroom home to buy the 4-bedroom home or a 2-bedroom home, that's then freeing that smaller, more affordable property up for sale on the market. So as much as they might not be affordable here on the new home, on the new side, they're actually releasing the second-hand property or the third-hand property, which is more affordable.
Yeah.
But on any development, you're always going to get an affordable element anyway. It's very rare that you'll get a development where the builder will just be building big 4 and 5-bedroom nudges where only the super rich can afford.
Yeah.
There is a mix, and that's what a lot of the councils do now. They're wanting to have a mix. So the site we decided in Woolhampton, there was an element of social apartments, there was 2-bedroom houses, there was 3-bedroom houses, then you had 4 bedrooms, and then the big 4 bedrooms at the back. So there's a whole mix.
A blend for the different options for different demographics.
And it's building a community, and that's what they want to be doing. They want to be building a community of people, not just a community of houses and people that have got 4x4s, and it's a community. So whether it's young families, whether it's old families, whether it's people moving down market, every developer wants to build a community.
Yeah.
And that's what they want to be doing.
And I think you see that with a lot of the developments now. We see it because we're heavy on social media, that you see some of the Facebook groups that are very strong communities which comes from the way that developers have set it up. So it raises a good point. And just so people don't attack me later on this, the stat was there's more golf course land than properties in the UK. Is that right?
Yeah, so golf courses covered, I can't remember exactly what it was. I think golf courses covered twice as much land that is covered by urban property.
And which is amazing, isn't it? That's crazy. And it's low percentages in the UK as well for both.
Yeah. It's only, I think it's just under 5%.
Yeah, which is crazy. So let's just work on a case study then, and we'll do this live and random on the podcast now because sometimes that's the most fun way to do it. But if we work on a case study based on an investor is looking at a development and they're thinking, do I buy the detached family home? Because we hark on a lot on this podcast about the safe bet being a family home is a really good place to invest your money for the long term. It's the best place to keep the void period is low, and it's the easiest rental, and normally it's got the strongest equity growth as well. So if we were kind of just splitting down the line and saying 4-bed townhouse versus 4-bed detached, and let's say the 4-bed townhouse is worth 500 grand in whatever location it's in, when you're looking at the pound per square foot of the townhouse versus the detached, it will always be lower on the townhouse than it will be on the detached, the actual pound per square foot. So inevitably you're going to get more house for your money with the townhouse than you are with the detached. From your point of view, Tristan, when you're valuing that and you're looking at, let's just say 1,800 square foot for both, 4 beds, good size 4 beds. What's the swing on the detached house that's got 4 beds, 2 bathrooms versus the townhouse that's also got 4 beds, 2 bathrooms? It's maybe marginally smaller, but not by much. Is there a big swing on the rental?
There is a slight change between them. I think it depends on the development itself. The ones I've had recently, square footage have been fairly similar. Obviously, the townhouse has been slightly bigger. But I think it comes down to the preference of the individual. I think we're in a marketplace now where it's so busy. Any property of 3 bedrooms plus will go straight away at a premium price. I think the benefit that the investor needs to look at is with a new build, you don't have to spend on a new boiler, you don't need to spend on wear and tear on the property. So regardless of whether it's detached or townhouse, it's going to be minimal expenditure at the start of that for a good period of time, even with a repaint. Whereas with an older property, you're going to have the likes of increased EPC rating come 2025, potentially works on the boilers because they're getting old if it's an older property and so forth. But typically the ones we've had recently, the most recent one was Shinfield Meadows. We had a 3-bedroom townhouse that had 2 reception rooms. That typically went at 1,850 but had offers in around the £2,000 mark. Whereas a detached house we've had recently, that come on at 2,250. So it's about £250 rough difference on that for a similar style property. But both have their own benefits, in my opinion. They're both different shapes and sizes. It just depends on the individual.
So you probably find for the yield, when you're talking to developers or investors, I should say, looking to buy, probably find for the yield, the townhouse is slightly better. Maybe for resale or for equity growth, maybe the house has got a little bit more margins on that potentially. Would you say one sells faster than the other from new build, just in general buyers?
It goes back to the buyer, and it goes back on the buyer's preference. So if you're looking at a standard 2-storey detached house as opposed to a standard 3-storey townhouse, it's the preference that you want. So if you've got a young family, do they want to have their kids on separate floors and what they're sleeping on? Invariably no. So therefore the townhouse is going to the traditional 2-storey house is going to sell. If you've got Mr. and Mrs. that want to buy there, they haven't got kids, or the kids may be older, they work from home, the townhouse may sell quicker because they've got an area where they can close it off as an office area. So they're each on their own merit, and I think as Tristan alluded to, I think if you're looking at it as an investment, brand new against second hand, brand new statistically you don't really have to do any work for the first 10 years, apart from maybe your own decoration and what have you. Whereas if you buy a new home, a second hand property, within 3 months something might go wrong. Something might, you might want to change something. You need to change something. Whereas a new home, you're going to have invariably a 1 year or 2 year builder's warranty on the products within the house. You've also got the NHBC or the build warranty. You know that it's been built to a standard that is with the most recent building regulations, because that's what it has to be built by. It can't just be built up and then somebody gives a warranty. So it's been built to the most recent building regulations, which change daily. It's got a warranty on the build. So you've got a 10-year warranty, plus you've got the builder's warranty. So from a new home point of view, if I was looking at buying to rent somewhere, I would buy a new home.
I think the other thing to mention for when we're talking that end of the market for rentals for tenants, when you're talking 225, something like that from a rental value, what I found historically is if we're talking about a second-hand 4-bed detached that's been let out for the last 10 years, the cost of maintenance and refurbishment and management of that is so high that actually a lot of those 4-bed detached properties that rent out are not great inside for the tenant. They're not fantastic condition. The carpets are filthy. The walls are not great. The bathrooms do need a refit. The tiles are, the grout and the mould is not looking fantastic. And I think that's because the cost of fitting that out after, if we talk 5, 6, 7 year cycles of tenants being in there, normally you've got to do probably 50% of that property for maintenance. But with a new build, like you say, it's very much convenient led for the investor. And I think if we're talking about different demographics of investors that aren't tradies and handy, then a lot of people are, say, money rich within reason, but time poor at the moment. And that's where the new build area comes into play really well for a convenient investor, I would say, as well.
Yeah, but I think you've got to look at the point as well. I mean, this is something we discussed on the most recent partner chats we had on Zoom the other week. The actual percentage you'll get more for a brand new home over a second-hand property, and they reckon in the UK it's as high as 41%. So in Scotland, if you buy a brand new home in Scotland, you will rent it for 41% more than the same equivalent second-hand property. And it comes down, I think comes down to about sort of 21% in the southeast. So if you're buying a brand new home in the southeast, you're going to get 21% more rent than you would do of the same ilk second-hand property.
I would beg the void period would be that much longer as well with the new build, because it's nice being in a nice new property, isn't it?
Yeah.
It feels good. You feel more comfortable living there. But if you've got a dated bathroom or a dated kitchen, it will always grate on you for a period of time, and you'll look to buy yourself or rent another property. So no, really good exercise. The next part of the podcast is where Tristan just says, take your professional hat off and just fire some questions at you individually, which we always love at the end of the podcast because it's nice and authentic, and we'll find out a little bit about what you feel the market's going to do. So I'll pass over to you.
Thank you. If you can keep the answer sort of as short as possible.
You know me.
Exactly. Straight to it. In the brightest possible way.
It used to be called quickfire, and then we changed it because it was no longer quickfire.
So what happens next in the property market?
Obviously, we've got stamp duty, help to buy, finishing in March 2023. So we need to see what's going to happen with the government in terms of they're going to bring any more buying schemes for first-time buyers, because it's been very, very successful over the last 3 years, 7 years. Obviously, it broke up from everybody was eligible to it to then 2019, I think it was. It went just to first-time buyers. So I think if they do something with that, the market will continue to grow. I think there's still an awful lot of demand out there for new homes. I think the way the developers have changed in what they're perceived built and what they're building, what the perception from the buyers is with regards to developers is a lot better than it used to be 5, 6, 7 years ago. You always used to hear the horror stories. You don't hear as much of that now. Yes, there's still a few companies that get it wrong and don't deal with it. There are companies that get it wrong but then deal with it correctly. But what the buyer needs to understand, it is a man-made product, and there's usually invariably up to 15 separate trades building a home. So all it needs is for one of those to go wrong.
Yeah, or a supply issue for one of those.
Or a supply issue, yeah. So long story short, I think the market will continue to rise.
And do you think the cost of living will that have any impact on that at all?
No, because people's aspirations will always be to have a bigger and better home.
Okay, cool. And then if you was to invest in a perfect property, what does that look like to you? buy-to-let property?
If I was buying a property, I would buy a 3 or a 4 bedroom home. If I could afford it. If I couldn't, I would buy a 2 bedroom flat.
Okay.
Would you buy a new build or would you buy second?
That was my next question.
Brand new, definitely.
Brand new.
Yeah.
On record, brand new, definitely.
Yeah, but always buy brand new because, as I say, you've got that 10-year window minimum of not having to do any work on it.
And I'll vouch for the fact that that's not just you selling new homes. You bought a new home as your last property, so you've vouched by that as well, definitely.
Yeah.
And what's the best single piece of advice you can give a property investor?
Best single piece of advice. Look at the area, look at the environment, look at the developer, and look at the long-term aspect of it. Never buy a rental property as a short-term win. If you're going to buy an investment property, it needs to be a long-term gain, because you'll not only earn the profit from the rental, but you'll also earn the capital growth, because the house market will always go up.
And we see that every 10 years on house growth and a lot of buy-to-lets.
I think if you look at the average house price in 1975, it was £100,000. The average house price now in 2022 is £297,000.
Yeah.
So that's nearly a 300% increase, if that's what I work my maths right. That's nearly a 300% increase.
It's crazy. I've seen that stat come through as well. I think I shouted out to you on the day.
Yeah.
It was like 244% increase, I think it was, for the southeast.
Yeah. So sorry, go on.
I was going to say, although a lot of people are spouting about corrections in the market or the bubble, this mystery bubble that's been spoken about for 20 years that we've not seen in the property market. We obviously saw it pop once, but that wasn't a bubble related. It was down to obviously what was going on in the US. So I think, for the market, I totally agree with your points on that. I think we're looking at a shortage of properties on the market, a heightened amount of demand, and even if that demand levels off a little bit, we'll still see those 2, 3, 4, 5% growths per year. Maybe not the craziness of what last year brought, where it was 10, 11, 12, 15 in some areas, but we'll still see a really solid market. And it's been really good on this podcast to get a really inside specific piece of information from you on exactly what's going on with developers and new homes. So really enjoyed it, and thank you for your time. So Andy's finished with us, and I thought that would be a really good podcast. And actually for me, I've, again, from a selfish point of view, learned quite a lot about new homes, and it gets me thinking every single time, where do you invest in your next deal? And I'm really thinking now from a new homes point of view, a couple of options. But what was your best takeaway?
Very insightful. For me, it was the ideal investment with a new home would be buying a show home. And the reason for that is you buy it, you lease it to, or they lease it from you for a period of time, which could be 2, 3, 4 years potentially, while the development's being built. And then at the end of it, they give it back, and they'll normally go in and do some work to it as well. So you're pretty much buying a brand new property to rent for X amount of years, and you'll come out of a new property at the end, and you get a 6.5% return on that as well. So it's a great investment to have, really. Yeah,
and I happen to know the development near me. There's 4 show homes. I think the average price for the 4 show homes, when purchased by a developer who did exactly that, was about £500,000 each, and they're let out for £3,000 a month each. So unbelievable yield on it. So definitely a great tip. I thought it was really insightful to hear how developments are trying to be turned into communities, and things like reuse of rainwater. You're talking about pumps and what's going on with boilers and things like that, but actually how developers are trying to make them e-friendly communities is quite interesting. And the different demographics of what planning permission the councils effectively look for to approve a site as well. So very insightful. I'm sure people listening might have some questions for Andy. If you do, check him out, like I said, on LinkedIn. He's on LinkedIn, he's on Facebook specifically, Meade New Homes, and you'll get all the information there. And obviously feel free to drop him a DM if you want any advice on some new homes. Or if you are a developer and you're thinking, actually, I'd like to talk to Andy about some pricing schedules or potentially some marketing, then definitely check him out there as well, because I think you'd get a lot of information from that. So until next week, Tristan, Mike's back from holiday, and I'm looking forward to our next guest. I'm flicking through YouTube and through Spotify. I don't think there's a podcast or a video channel on YouTube that landlords can land on where they're not being sold something.
I mean, it'd be the first time any estate agent's ever asked that question, but why not ask that question to a wider audience?
Estate agents have the knowledge there, but they don't seem to share it.
You can do different episodes based around someone that wants an exit plan or someone that's just starting their portfolio.
The rules change every year.
Yeah.
But why not just open the floor out and just say, well, is property even the best investment out there?
And tax advice is a big thing, especially with everything that's changed, capital gains tax and obviously your stamp duty costs that you need to pay and whatnot. People don't realise what they need to prepare for.
We build a podcast and we build a YouTube channel, somewhere that landlords can go and they feel they're not being sold to, but they're just getting quality advice.